It felt like Velcro ripping, or polystyrene breaking. It just felt like a big rip in my mind. And what happened was the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, became lucid in my form. There was a greater intelligence that somehow woke up in my form and looked out through my eyes and realized that it had fallen asleep and dreamt itself into my form. And then all of a sudden, I realized that, oh, okay, I understand that I'm this higher being, this higher intelligence, dreaming myself into me, but I'm also the walls. I'm also the music, the light that's coming through the window. That's also me as well. I realized that, oh, so I just became lucid in this one, but I'm also the one that's dreaming myself into all of the other characters, but they're all still asleep in their dream. So there was just one being dreaming itself into all of us.
I am so happy to be here today with Gareth Dignam. Gareth's spiritual journey began in 2006 when he started meditating and he was introduced to the spiritual realm by a friend. Gareth, you and I have something in common, many things in common, but one notable thing that we have in common is that we kind of got started on our spiritual path in a search for an answer to death, this big puzzle of what death is and what happens after we die. So take me back to the beginning, 2006. How did you begin your spiritual journey?
Sure. Hi, Tia. Thank you for having me on your show. Very happy to be here. Yeah, I mean, I guess from for a very young age, I sort of just felt like I just didn't belong. I had been born into a family, nice people, but just something didn't feel right to me. Um, I had a few mystical experiences as a child when I was like maybe 5 or 6. I woke up out of my body one evening and found myself floating down the stairs and woke up the next day thinking that I had been bitten by a vampire because only vampires could float around the house. Um, and then I had a few other experiences where I was aware that there was awareness that was listening to my mind all the time. And I was always really curious as to what that was. I was like, okay, I have a voice in my head. I said, but what's listening to that? And I used to sit on the floor thinking about that. Um, Later on in my teenage years, I noticed that I would set myself goals. I would say, okay, when I get this next thing in my life, it was maybe a dog or a girlfriend or a car. I was like, that's going to make me happy. I'm going to find happiness once I get that thing in my life. And I went through this succession of setting goals, reaching them, and then finding out that it didn't bring happiness. And I was like, what is this all about? Like, why can't I find happiness? Um, at the same time, I also felt that I had this kind of looming fear of the unknown. Was I just a body? If my body died, was that it? Did everything just cease to exist? And I thought that was really bleak, that any moment, my life or any of people that I love, their lives could just be taken away. So, fast forward to about the age of 25, I was going on vacation and I was on the airplane. I was really bored. I was going out with a girl at the time, and she handed me a Louise Hay book, You Can Heal Your Life. And I was like, okay, what's this? And I started reading it, and there was all these new ideas and concepts that I just never even, imagined, like we choose our parents, how our thoughts can, sort of influence our reality. And I was like, okay, seems weird, but I'm open-minded and I'll give it a go. So I immediately started doing the exercises, started working on myself, and noticed that my life started to change. As I started to change, people around me started to change. I started to have more confidence. I started to attract more financial abundance into my life. But then, after a couple of years of doing that, I kind of realized that there seems to be some sort of law in the universe. And when I put out a command or a request, that the universe can answer it. But it wasn't enough. I wanted more. answers. So I kept searching, and I eventually came across a book by Brian Wise, Many Lives, Many Masters. And he was a hypnotherapist who started regressing people back through their lives to find pain, and then all of a sudden realized that he was bringing people into past lives. So I got really interested in this was kind of really sparked something in me where I was like, okay, maybe there's, if there's past lives, then there's an afterlife. And I really wanted to get to the bottom of it, but I couldn't, right? There was nothing there. It was just me reading other people's experiences. So a little bit later, I came across a gentleman called Bob Monroe, and Bob Monroe wrote the three books called Journeys Out of the Body, Ultimate Journeys, and I think Far Journeys. And it was all about out of body experiences. And I was just totally blown away by this. And I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. If I can do that, then I know that I live beyond the body. So I started practicing and practicing. And eventually, one evening, I just woke up with vibrations running up and down my body and a really strange jet engine kind of sound that was getting louder and louder in my ears. And I kind of knew, I wasn't really afraid because I had read all about it. And then all of a sudden, two hands reached in and grabbed me under my arms and pulled me out of my body and catapulted me through the ceiling. And I started flying across all the fields nearby. And I eventually came down a couple of, I don't know, it didn't last very long, but I eventually came down in a field. And I was like, I am out of my body. And I was looking around and I looked at my hands. I got really excited. And then it felt like a big rubber band just pulled me back into my body. And I sat up and I went, that's it. I said, I know I don't die. I've been out of my body. I was totally, didn't get a wink of sleep that night. But that was the start of it. That was my first kind of real big spiritual awakening. That was me understanding that if my body dies, I live on. There's a part of me that lives on.
I too had out of body experience, spontaneous out of body experiences. I didn't even know what they were. And that was the beginning of my spiritual journey. Around that same time, there was other events involved, but it really gives you a sense of comfort when you are outside of your body. You can look back at your body and know that you
Yeah.
exist and you don't need your body to exist. Your body's over there. There's no more
Yeah.
validating way to prove that death isn't what we've been taught or what we think it is.
Yeah. So my understanding after having an out of body experience was that I have a replica of my body which is eternal, right? Doesn't need food, it doesn't need shelter, it doesn't need sleep, and it can exist when when my body's not in use or if it dies. And that was so freeing. I mean, that was one of the biggest yeah, it just put my mind at ease. I was like, okay. And that sparked that then sent me off on my spiritual journey. So for the next year and a half, I started having spontaneous out of body experiences. Um, I I wanted to have them, but it just seemed I would wake up at nighttime in the vibrational state and they just started happening, right, without me doing anything. And I had lots of fun, lots of great experiences. I kind of met disembodied humans, who had probably died, and I had met astral beings and um but I noticed that what was kind of going on was I was having a great story, but there was no real quality of consciousness. My quality of consciousness wasn't improving, and I kind of learned that there's more to just having an experience. It's all about us sort of evolving, becoming more loving. Um, so yeah, I kind of eventually the OBEs seemed to stop. They died down. And then I just started having um really strange lucid dreams where I would find myself waking up in what seemed like classrooms. There seemed to be an awful lot of fear tests, different situations I would find myself in. I'd have to make the right decision, or if I didn't, I'd be taught a very valuable lesson. And there was lots of really like important things that even to this day they kind of stick in my mind. There was one very important one where I came across this. this calf, a baby cow that had gotten out of a field, and I was like, oh, I really need to, save that calf. And I ran over and I picked up the calf and I said, oh, I'm going to place it back in where it came from, and I put it over into the field, and I thought, okay, I've done a great deed. And I walked down to the bottom of the road, and this old man came over to me and he goes, I see you saved the calf. And I went, yeah. I felt really great. And then he kind of looked up, and I kind of looked at to see what he was looking at. And over at the front where the field was, there was a factory, and over the top of the factory, it had slaughterhouse. So by me interfering, I had put the calf back in to the slaughterhouse. So it kind of taught me this lesson is like, right, you know, by me thinking I'm doing the right thing, it doesn't necessarily mean that I am, So it really kind of made me kind of have this attitude of like, who am I to interfere in anything really? There's a bigger plan, there's a bigger picture, and by, you know, a lot of the times me getting involved, it just goes against that greater plan.
That's an interesting point because we always feel like we should help when we see another being struggling in some way. So,
Yeah.
how do we know when it's the right time to help and when to kind of just let it be?
So that's a very good question, and I kind of it took me a while to get to really the answer of that, and it dawned on me that usually my intellect was getting involved, right? My intellect had this concept of what was good, right? Because of how I was, my upbringing, cultural beliefs, I must do good things to seem like a good person, right? Versus me just having a good quality of consciousness and doing it from the being level. And I noticed that there was a difference. Both of them are good deeds, but one is coming from the mind, I should do this because society wants me to be a good person, versus me just being a good person. So yeah, I would always sort of like drop into my heart now and just kind of, have a feel. Am I interfering? Is this the right thing to do? Why do I want to help? Why do I want to interfere? What's the reason behind that?
So we need to learn how to trust our intuition, which I think is
Yeah.
a big challenge for most people. And before we go on that direction, I want to talk about the lucid dreaming and the out of body experiences for a minute. When you
Yeah.
have these lucid dreams or an out of body experience, are you going to the same place? Is it kind of the same place in both, or are they different realms?
They're okay, so they're I kind of see them as similar, right? They're closely related. OBEs, when I was having my OBEs, I was kind of like finding myself in this reality. So I was going to bed, falling asleep, waking up with the vibrational state, and then consciously separating from my body. But I was kind of in this reality, moving around, going to different places. Whereas the OBEs or the lucid dreams, I was sort of waking up in dream realities, and they kind of so I think they're very closely related, but they just seem to be, different realities, different kind of uh, I would nearly call the lucid dreams. They're kind of like virtual realities.
So in the out of body experience, was it an exact copy of Earth or was it actually Earth?
I would say it was a copy, I think, because sometimes I would notice that it didn't look exactly perfectly. There would be weird things in my room that I'd be like, oh, what was that? I didn't notice there was a clock on my wall before. So it seemed to be like a kind of a copy of it. Um,
I
you're
asked,
shaking your head. I think
yeah, I asked
yeah.
because that's the same experience I had as well, and I wanted to kind of see if you had experienced the same thing where everything is similar but not exactly the same. And I find that very interesting, like a copy of Earth. So it's interesting that you experienced that as well. So now in your lucid dreams, you were learning lessons. It was almost like you were in a classroom. Do you feel like these teachers that were teaching you, were they part of your spirit team or guides, or did they seem familiar to you?
So I call them they. I didn't get the sense that it was like a being or a person. I got the sense that it was just an intelligence. What that intelligence was, I really don't know. Maybe my higher self, maybe God. It would, and it wasn't like it would be sentences. It wouldn't be like someone was speaking to me. It would be like chunks of information I would just get in a packet, and it'd be like, oh, and it would feel like it would just kind of like unbox itself within my being, and I would go, okay, okay. And I mean, one of them, I still had this energy, this fear energy of dying in my system. And one evening I woke up and the energy, the intelligence was there, and it was like, we're going to show you what it is to die. And they asked me, was I okay? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, okay, we're gonna move you from, your living reality into the death state. And I was like, okay. And they were like, are you ready? And I was like, yes. And then it would move, and it would kind of feel like going from waking to dreaming, or waking up from a dream back into the sleep state or something. Like, it just felt like I was just phasing. And it was like, okay, now you've gone from living into the death phase, and now we're going to bring you back. And they would bring me back, and that went on about 6 or 7 times. And they said, that's all there is to dying. How do you feel? And I was like, fine. And they're like, okay, we're done. We don't have to go back.
That's
And
amazing that you got to
yeah.
experience what it was like to death over and over and over without actually having to die. So was there a lapse in consciousness, or can you go a little bit deeper and
No,
tell me?
no, there was no lapse in consciousness. And it was just literally, it just felt like I was just phasing, totally easy, painless, easy, just moving my awareness from one reality to another reality, and then back in. And we did that 6 or 7 times, and then I was told, yeah, that's all there is. That's what it feels like. No pain.
What did that reality look like or feel like?
No, it wasn't a reality. It just felt like it wasn't like I could see anything in it. It was just, I was just phasing from, the state I was in to a new state. There was nothing there. It was just a kind of a 3D spacious blackness.
Ah, maybe like the void that some near-death experiencers
Void.
describe.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah, it was void. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so while you're in the void, how did you feel?
Oh, like there's no fear, there's no anxiety. It's just void. It's just awareness without sensory input. Totally relaxing, freeing. But it was only for a matter of seconds. It was just, phasing from being in my body, phasing into the void, back in, and so forth.
What a great gift, and definitely a lesson that I'm sure catapulted your spiritual journey. And so you are learning all these things, you're having these lucid dreams, you're learning valuable lessons. You learn that it's important to trust your intuition. So what happens next?
Okay, so I kind of I kind of lost interest a little bit. I had 2 children. I was running a business. I actually got an illness as well that kind of put me in bed for about 2 years. And but I kind of always kind of kept up my meditation practice. Always kind of kept meditating because I just enjoyed doing it. The OBEs and the dreams, the OBEs died down, but the lucid dreams and the teachings, they kind of kept on. I kept having, always kind of these very vivid learning dreams. And eventually in 2016, I was going to the gym one morning. I had gotten over the illness. I had moved house, and I was regularly going to the gym. I went into the gym one morning, and I just got this really strange feeling. I kind of got this sense that I was being watched. I could hear music, and it was like the music is talking to me. Something feels really weird. And I kind of just stopped for a moment, and I questioned everything. I was like, the light that's coming in the window, I said, that's not out. It's not external. I says, that's in me. I said, the light is in me. And then I was like, and the music I'm hearing, the music is actually internal. It's all in me. And as soon as I said that, it felt like Velcro ripping, or polystyrene breaking. It just felt like a big rip in my mind. And what happened was, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, became lucid in my form. So I had had all the lucid dreams, and I kind of knew that had kind of been almost like I don't know, it was kind of like it got me ready for what was about to happen. So when it happened, I sort of had like a context of what was happening. I was like, okay, so just to explain to the listeners or the viewers what a lucid dream is. A lucid dream is when you wake up in a dream and you consciously know that you're dreaming and your body is asleep and you can move around in the dream. So what happened to me in this experience in the gym was there was a greater intelligence that somehow woke up in my form and looked out through my eyes and realized that it had fallen asleep and dreamt itself into my form and was going through this um, day after day dream experience, dreaming itself, I'm this Gareth character and I'm running the shop and I have all these worries about, how I'm going to pay the bills. And all of a sudden I knew that I was beyond my reality. I was this supreme being with all of this knowledge, basically God. Basically, God woke up through my form and looked out through my eyes. And then all of a sudden I realized that, oh, okay, I understand that I'm this higher being, this higher intelligence, dreaming myself into me, but I'm also the walls. I'm also the music, the light that's coming through the window. That's also me as well. And then and then as I started, because it's almost like you're trying to piece it all together as it's happening. Your intellect is going crazy. And then all of a sudden I realized that, oh, so I just became lucid in this one, but I'm also the one that's dreaming myself into all of the other characters, but they're all still asleep in their dream. So there was just one being dreaming itself into all of us, and that was huge. So that was what I would call God realization. Now, my nervous system wasn't able to maintain that. So it opened up for about 10 minutes. I actually started crying in the gym. I sat down on a bench. I was like, couldn't believe what was happening. And eventually it kind of that really, really heightened experience just started to kind of close down, almost like the aperture of a camera. And I was like, okay, I have to leave. And I left and I had the most amazing day. I felt bliss and I felt love and I felt connected to everything. And on my journey into work, I just had this, I could have stayed in the car for like, a week on that journey. It was just the most beautiful thing ever. But it seemed to die down. I couldn't, my nervous system couldn't maintain it. But the next day I woke up and I was different. I was like, okay, there's something different. At the center of what I am, something has changed, something has shifted, and I feel totally free. I feel there's all my fear was gone, completely like gone. It was just wiped clean. And I then went on the quest to understand what happened. And that really turned me into a spiritual seeker. I wasn't really a spiritual seeker. Yes, I was very interested in lucid dreaming and OBE states, but I didn't really understand what a spiritual awakening was. I really didn't. I just thought it was, oh, you get interested in out of body experience, and that's a spiritual awakening. I didn't know that there's something that awakens through you and looks out through your eyes. So that was then over the next 5 years, I just went trying to find everything I could on what happened.
I think it's interesting to point out that you had a spiritual awakening. You became enlightened in the gym, and you call that the beginning of your spiritual journey. That when
Yeah.
really a lot of people, that is their final goal. They hope that something like that happens, but really it's just the beginning, then, right?
It was the beginning. It was almost like consciousness gave me like a very late stage taste. It was like there's a really big peak experience that you cannot deny, and then that's going to start you off on your spiritual journey. And it did. I was like, I want that. That's what I want. I had this experience of God, oneness, totally connected to everything, love. And I was like, that's what I want. And that's what led me on. And I was like, nothing was going to stop me. I was like, yeah, I'm going to find that.
Were you able to find it?
Well, it didn't come overnight. It started off, there was probably a 2 year period of me now operating from a completely different place. The fear was gone, the anxiety was gone, the story was gone, the identification with my ego seemed to have broken, and I just wasn't bothered by my ego anymore. Now, that's not to say that my ego was completely gone, it was still there, but it wasn't annoying me the way it used to annoy me. I wasn't waking up with anxiety anymore or worry. I just because I knew what I was. And what I was at the center of my being was just unbounded awareness that was never born and will never die. And I was like, it's just totally freeing. It's like I took off this really uncomfortable shoe and I can now, it kind of feels like this is like I've been born again, is probably the best way I could describe it. I had been born again. Yeah, so 2 years probably went by where I didn't, I was reading all about it, didn't tell many people about it. I kind of found myself going to the odd little seminar, came across a couple of different teachers who had spoke about what had happened to me, and I was like, okay, that seems to be it. And I think about 2 years later, I came across this sort of concept of Kundalini. And I was like, oh, okay, Kundalini, interesting. And I don't know why I was interested in it, but in the meantime, I had also been having these glimpses when I would walk outside the door, go for these little walks, and it was like this little aperture would open up again, and I would start to see myself in nature. Um, it kind of felt like I was taking every step I took was the first step I ever took on this planet. And it was almost like everything I was seeing with fresh eyes. I had never seen it before. It was being displayed just for me. So I was like, I was getting these glimpses and these kind of feelings of like my heart opening and oneness with everything, but they would close down. Then I came across the Kundalini, and somehow something in me knew that I had to go after this sort of flip side of spiritual awakening, which was our bodies and our nervous systems coming online in the spiritual awakening. So I found a teacher, a Danish teacher, who could give a transmission called Shaktipat, and I went and I received Shaktipat. It was a 3-day retreat, and I didn't notice a whole lot on the first day. Second day, I kind of had a little bit of resistance towards the teacher, almost felt like leaving at one stage. And on the third day, something changed. And I was sat there and I had all this bliss in my face and in my head. And I actually felt like I couldn't even be in the room any longer. Um, the next day, or maybe 2 days later, I just noticed that I was different. I was like, something has changed. I don't know what it is. I felt like I had bliss in my hands, bliss in my face, in my eyes, in my head. And I was like, what is happening? Um, and for the next 3 months, I went into a state of ecstatic bliss that lasted 24/7. From the minute I would get up in the morning till going to bed at night time, I was living in bliss. I really did, I had no clue what had happened. It just felt like I had won some sort of lottery. I also started to wake up then with energy rushing up and down the center of my spine. Um, and I realized, yeah, it was my Kundalini had awoken and was moving up and down through my central channel.
And from this point on, did you maintain that feeling?
It went on for about 3 months. After about 3 months, I noticed that I started to lose the bliss. And it was really, really annoying. It was like, oh my God, where's it gone? I had gotten so used to it and I felt like it was getting less and less. So I was like, I need to go on a second retreat. So I actually traveled to Copenhagen to this teacher again, did another retreat with him, got back, but noticed that I wasn't experiencing the same bliss again. But then about a week later, I went through a full Kundalini awakening where I sort of got paralyzed. I was listening to music on my bed, and this energy woke up in me, started to travel up into my spine, all the way up into my head. And I felt almost like the top of my crown open up, like what they describe in the spiritual traditions, the thousand petal lotus opened up. My consciousness filled with light. It was the most beautiful experience ever. So I experienced the full Kundalini awakening, and yeah, it was just another phase on my journey.
And you talk about phases. Are there phases that typically happen on a spiritual journey? Like one thing happens before another?
Yes. So uh, there is an unfolding of consciousness, and everybody's experience is different because consciousness is awakening through completely unique body, mind, nervous systems, right? So it's never exactly the same, but there are some signposts and characteristics that are sort of, you know, we can all kind of relate to them. And the first one I had was that shift into self-realization. A little bit after the Kundalini awakening, I shifted into what's known as unity consciousness. So I was meditating in bed one morning and I was contemplating what is unity consciousness because I had been reading about it. And all of a sudden I saw this coffee mug in my vision. And I straight away I said, "Oh, that's the container for my consciousness." And then I saw the coffee mug was next to some prison bars, and I went, "Oh, and that's me being imprisoned." And all of a sudden, the coffee mug started being tapped on the prison bars, three, one, two, and on the third tap, the coffee mug shattered, and there was an explosion of white light in my mind that absolutely blinded me. It felt like it traveled into the four corners of the universe. I was like in complete like white light, totally blind, couldn't hear anything. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening? And then all of a sudden, it all imploded back in on itself, came back in, and everything just went really, really quiet and still. And I was just sat there going, oh my God, this is incredible. Everything just got stiller and stiller and stiller. And I mean, I sat there for about 2 hours, but I had to eventually get up, and I was different. And what I noticed was I couldn't really put my finger on it, but what felt like was the edges of me had dissolved and my consciousness now was spilling out into my surroundings. So it kind of felt like everything became panoramic. It felt like I was home no matter where I was. Even if I was, walking down a busy street, it just felt like home. Everywhere was home. And it kind of felt like the subject and the object had collapsed. And there was no me here and reality out there. Everything was just sort of one now. I was kind of one with my surroundings and my reality.
What was the main cause of this spiritual experience? Was it your desire, the work that you've been doing, or a combination?
Yeah. So I had there was like a thirst in me, and I was like, I want to go all the way with this. Like, there's no in between. I'm not just here to have a taste of it. I want to go all the way. And what would happen was I would read books where other people had spoke about these states, and I kind of go, okay, that's the next stage. I want to get there. And I was kind of doing anything I could, self-inquiry, meditation, and it was just unfolding naturally. And it was sort of like um, just these stages, and they would just open up, and I would have these different experiences, and I would be different after them. After that experience, I was very different.
Do you have a roadmap for others to follow of like, okay, this is what I did here, and then I did this, and then this is what happened, so that people that are watching and thinking, oh my gosh, I want this, I need this in my life, they have kind of a map to follow?
Yes. So I wrote a book called Waking Up from the Dream, and it's written about my journey, sort of like from my teenage years of nonconformity, uh, everything we've discussed, and I kind of go into detail about all of these different stages and what they might look like, and it's done in a sort of very entertaining way. I kind of, I like to keep things lighthearted, and some of the stories are kind of, they're lighthearted and funny, but it's a roadmap basically, and it gives people a step by step. Now, it's not that you can just read the book and these stages are going to open up for you, but if you are going through a spiritual awakening, you can kind of read my experience and go, "Oh, okay, that's what I'm going through."
I think that
There's
it's
the
no,
signposts. Yeah.
yeah, signposts. And I think it's notable to touch on the fact that you had this first experience in the gym after you had already kind of just given up, moved, not maybe not given up, but moved away from your deep dive into spirituality. And it was almost like, would you say that the universe was coming back to you or God and saying, hey, no, let's keep going?
Yes. So one of the things that I've learned over the years is that we as the individual cannot initiate a spiritual awakening. A spiritual awakening almost feels like an accident when it happens. It kind of felt like an accident. It's like, well, why did this happen to me? Why did it happen in the gym of all places? Why not in a temple or in nature? It happened in the gym. So it kind of felt like an accident that I had no part in. Um, but I also later learned that I had had previous lives where I had gone through spiritual awakenings also. And they were most likely the reason why I had just had this crazy big awakening, and it just unfolded very fast for me. During my awakening, there was always these different um scenarios, stages been revealed to me. And one of them was I was shown my three previous lives to this one. And I had been in India. I was a disciple of a very famous Indian guru. In the previous one, I had awakened. I was back in Dublin. And then another one, I was in the United States. Um, I then discovered that I had awareness of a life in between lives where I am when I'm not in a body. And that was revealed to me. I was told why I'm coming into a body, what the reason is. Um, so yeah, I had that open up. I was shown um yeah, pretty much a reality that um kind of spiritual beings reside in, and they get to kind of pick their incarnations. And the whole process was shown to me. The concept of time there and time in our reality was shown to me as well. um and why it seems like such a good idea to come here, because on that side it's only 20 minutes. It was like, okay, it's like 20 minutes, you go up, you put your head into a VR headset, and you go back in. But when you come back in, it's 80 something years. You have to learn how to walk, talk, go through, childhood, teenage years. And yeah, you forget everything. All your memories get wiped as you're coming back in.
I want to talk about all of these things because all of this is very
Sure.
fascinating. So tell me more about this in-between state. Are you living in a house on like an earth style landscape, or what does it look like?
Okay. So in all of my experiences, having dreams and out of body experiences, I was always me. I was always me having them. A lot of the times, even in dream states, it was always humans I was interacting with. This wasn't a human plane of existence. It kind of looked like an oil painting. It was blue. There was different shades of blue. There were some sort of structures, but they sort of just looked like rectangles, and there were just different shades of blue. And the beings there had small little heads and triangular bodies, and they sort of glided along. Um, and I was one of them. And I had family there and friends, and beings that I've incarnated with hundreds of thousands of times, and I really loved them. And they told me why I was there and what I can do there and the decisions. So basically, um, it's a place where I can go in between lives. I can rest, I can recover, I can plan out my next life. Um, yeah, and they gave me different lessons. And again, the language on that side isn't spoken in sentences, it's telepathy. It's literally like the communication is just coming in chunks of information from being to being. It's not like you sit there and have a conversation. It's just like packets of information, and you get them into your being, and it's like you get a whole string of sentences in one go.
And then someone comes along and says, "Hey, you want to go, do this VR headset for 20 minutes?" Or how does that happen?
Yeah. So it was sort of like another being there, and it was like, come on, come over here. We'll show you where you're going next. And it wasn't a VR headset, but that's sort of how when I came back, it was like, okay, the only way I could sort of interpret it was a VR headset. So it was like you just kind of come up, you kind of go into it, and then all of a sudden it's like I could actually see myself coming down the tunnel into a body. And as I was coming down the tunnel, I was like, I and you know I've fallen for it again. It kind of felt like I had been duped into coming back in. It was done in my free will. I agreed to it, but it was like, oh no, I have to learn all that stuff again. I have to be a child. And that kind of annoyed me. And when I not in it, not that it was bad, but it was just kind of like, oh, I fell for it again. But I know it was in my highest good to come back in.
So they do give you a choice and they let you kind of choose,
Yes.
select the things that you want to learn.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I had kind of been the previous life where I was in India, as I was coming out of that lifetime as well. Just to give you some sort of how I knew they were all connected. All of these lifetimes, when I would come out of them, it would feel like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. It was like, oh, I had a life there. I had people that I loved. There was a real emotional signature or a thread running from each one. Everyone I would wake up out of the lucid dream and I would sob my heart out, because there was something that was unresolved there that I needed to clear. And when I came back from that in between reality, it was the same signature. It was like, those are my family. I miss them. I want to be back with them. Um, so yes, so they kind of gave me. Now, I mean, I don't have a whole load of information. I can't sit here and tell you that I chose this and I chose that. But when I was coming out of the previous life, I was told that in this life, I was going to come to the West and I was going to bring in these energies that I work with. Um, so that's a lot of the work that I do is the energy that I bring in.
When you were talking about your family and you have family over there on that other side, when I think of a VR headset, I think of that as a very singular experience. It's just me having that experience. How are they, or do they interact with us like on Earth here, our family from the other side?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think that I think they don't interfere a lot. Like, I don't think they can come down and influence us, but I think they can like kind of come into our dreams and synchronicities and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, it took me, I don't know, 40 something years before I was able to have any recollection of what was going on that side. So yeah, I didn't know about them until I was shown it.
Do they come as our family members here or friends or I don't know, maybe even acquaintances, people that we meet at the grocery store that we smile at?
Yes. So I had the feeling that some people who I was close to in this reality were also from that reality. Definitely. Yeah. And I was actually also shown a parallel life that I have where I'm well, it's probably about 3 years ago. So I was this 13-year-old boy living in India, and I had this best friend. It was like this 13-year-old girl. We went to school together, and I actually knew who the 13-year-old girl was. Um, in this life, she was a woman in her late 60s who I'm friends with, and she's also having a parallel life where we're best friends in India. And I would after school I would go to this hardware store where I would work, and I would meet people at the back of the hardware store. I'm psychic in this life, and I would sit there and I would tell people, give them readings about their future. So that was a parallel life that I had running simultaneously to this one at the moment.
So it's not just a singular experience in this VR headset. When you go in, there's a dynamic to it. There's multiple experiences happening all at once.
Yes. So my understanding is that we have an oversoul, and the oversoul is playing multiple characters simultaneously um, at the same time.
Is that Oversoul the one that has the little head and the triangular body? Or is there something
No,
above
no.
that?
There's something above that. Yeah. So the oversoul sort of seems just like an awareness, not really got like a personality the way we have. It's just a kind of a collective consciousness of a group of souls who are coming in, having life experiences.
When we are on the other side, you were kind of talked into coming back down for a quick VR headset trip.
20 minutes.
Is there a point where you can go beyond that and say, I don't want to do that anymore and I'm just going to stay here forever?
I guess okay, so we from what I understand is we have free will, right? We can choose not to come here if we please. Um, but I don't what I think is that there's no real growth when we're hanging around in these, really nice places where everything's nice and there's no, not a whole lot of decisions to make. We're not really progressing. So I think we can go there, we can rest for a while, but I think the rubber meets the road when we're in a physical body, right? It's hard here. We have decisions, we have mortgages, we have marriages, we have all these different things that kind of force us to make decisions. And from what I understand is this is where we do all our learning. This is where we evolve, is in this reality. So I also had these experiences where I kind of uh, found what was at the top. I kind of got to these really, really high states of consciousness. And one of them was this uh, non-existence, right? You talked about the void, but this was beyond the void. This was like the void on steroids. It was uh it felt like a near-death experience. So basically I was kind of getting pulled into these states of meditation every day where I would kind of like completely disappear. And on this one evening I sat down and I kind of got this rush of terror came over me, almost like I had stepped out in front of a juggernaut that was rushing towards me, and it felt like the abyss. And I was like, oh my God, what is that? That is terrifying. I don't want any part of it. And I kind of got really scared because it didn't feel like I was going to die. It felt like I was going to be erased from the server, right? There was nothing. There was no consciousness. There was no up, down, no body. And I understood that I had to go into it. That was part of it. I had to go into it. And just as I was going into it, I felt this terror. And when I went into it, I disappeared and I was gone for about 2 hours. No recollection. Had no human experience, no body, no name, nothing. No, I didn't know anything. I was just gone. And then all of a sudden, my consciousness decided that it was time to come back. As I was coming back, I realized what was happening. The kind of terror came back, and then I was like, oh my God, what just happened there? What was that? It was like terrifying. Um, and I understood that that was an aspect of consciousness before it became conscious. So this is where it all started from. God or, you know, reality bubbled up from this primordial nothingness, nothing, no attributes. Um, so I was like, okay, that was weird. I really didn't want to go back into that. I was like, okay, hope that doesn't happen again. The next night, something else happened. I sat down to meditate. My awareness was all of a sudden I noticed this little blue dot opened up in front of me. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And all of a sudden I was pulled into the blue dot and I became one with this blue dot. And I was noticed that I was in this cyan blue sea of consciousness. And it wasn't like I was here and I was looking around. It was like I had become it. I was there. I was somehow I had, my faculties as well, but I had merged into it. And it was pure potential, pure love, pure brilliance. And it, it was bliss. And I was looking around, I was going, wow, this is incredible. I never wanted to come out of this place. And that to me was the Godhead. There was absolute nothingness. And from the nothingness sprang this pure potential, which is the Godhead. And I had experienced both of them one night after the other. I stayed in that place for about an hour. And while I was there, the concept of me being back in reality, kind of having spiritual awakenings, was sort of laughable because while I was connected with it, the idea of something being separate and thinking that it had some sort of spiritual awakening and had answers was totally laughable. So I had somehow merged with his Godhead. Um, I never got back to it. It was like it opened up for about an hour. I experienced it, and then it closed down. But I was totally different after it, after both experiences. And then about 2 years later, there was another aspect that opened up where the Godhead, I'm kind of using this triad at the very top. It was the nothingness, the Godhead, and then the Godhead split itself in two, the masculine and the feminine, right? And it gave all of its power to the feminine, right? Which is the Divine Mother. And I had the experience of the Divine Mother, and she was terrifying. She was the giver of life and the destructive force that takes it away. And she came into my body. She birthed galaxies through every cell. I kind of understood what she was, and she was like the powerhouse of all of existence. She's creating all the worlds, the dream worlds, the astral worlds, and she can give us life and she can take it away. So that was the tree that were at the top for me.
I'm trying to understand this consciousness that you felt in the cyan blue
Yes.
godhead. So what you're talking
Yeah.
about how there's no separateness. Were
Yes.
you just everything? Were you all there is?
Yeah. So it was like the source of everything. It was the source of consciousness. It was like and what I understood when I was there, it was like, oh, you know all the Hindu gods and goddesses, you know the way they have these blue faces? They're personalized versions of that reality. So for me, it was Krishna. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with the god Krishna. This was what Krishna was. This was He was a representation of this reality. And funny enough, Krishna actually turned up in one of my meditations another time and sat in front of me on the floor in the lotus position. And I was like, I could feel he was that. I could feel there was that same energetic connection, that love, absolute sort of like potential that was just there. Yeah. So that's where all them gods and goddesses got that blue color in their on their skin and face.
Very interesting. You said that when you went into this void beyond the void or whatever it was, there was
Yeah.
a fear of being erased from the server. And then
Yeah.
another term that you use is this VR headset. And this is all
Yeah.
very technological terminology. Would you say this is a simulation?
Yeah, okay. So during my journey, I came across a teacher called Tom Campbell. Tom Campbell was a physicist. He was also one of the explorers from Bob Monroe's, the Monroe Institute, this research of out-of-body experience. And Tom was a physicist, and he wrote a trilogy all about how consciousness worked. And he uses the terminology of VR, virtual reality, because we live in that sort of time now where we all get the concept of a VR. So is it do I use that? I mean, sometimes it's easy to use the term VR headset. To me, though, I kind of like the dream. Everything was a dream. Everything was a play of consciousness. It feels better to me to use that language.
So there's just not really words that can describe this experience.
They're just
Yeah,
metaphors.
it's just symbolic
Yeah.
representations.
Yeah, and every religion and every spiritual teacher that has written about it, they're just using their metaphors to describe it. They've all got, a portion of the truth. It's one truth. It's one truth. But we get it and then we just give it our version and put our metaphors on it.
So what would you say happens when we die? Like the process
Hmm.
of dying, going back into this blue atmosphere, this blue space with the weird bodies. Is there a process of
Okay,
getting there?
okay. So what I was told when I was there is that not all humans reside there in between lives. What I was told is most humans, when they die, they actually just come straight back into another body. They don't get that respite. It's just experience back in again, over and over until the soul starts to kind of get maturity, quality of consciousness, and then we get to kind of have more choice in what we want to do in our next incarnation.
You have hold on a second. Do you want to talk about your app? If my audience wanted to find you, Gareth, if they have some questions for you about all these fascinating experiences you've had, how can they find you?
Okay, so over the last 5 years, I sort of fell into the role of becoming a teacher. So I have a website called truespiritualawakening.eu. And basically what happens is I started these little Zoom groups, and I started with two or three people, and I would meditate with them. And a lot of the energies that I encountered during my awakening, and these great teachers that I went to find, they started awakening through me. And I, at one stage, I became transmissive. So basically what I do is every Tuesday and Friday I have an open Zoom group, don't charge any money, anyone can join. They come, they sit, we have a little bit of 10, 15 minutes of questions and answers, and then we meditate, and there's a transmission in the meditation. And I also stream them on my YouTube channel, so you can go onto my YouTube channel as well. It's True Spiritual Awakening. Um, and the same, it's I have all these meditations there that contain the transmissions. So people can just go on, oh, there's one of my videos, it's 3 years old, click play, close their eyes, meditate along with it, and they can actually pick up the transmission because there's no space and time. The transmission just exists there. The video is an interface for the user to have that connection with the energies. So that's a lot of what I do.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you people can actually participate in meditation with you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I've been running that for about 5.5 years.
Oh,
And
well,
it's grown and grown. I started off with like three people, and now there's like, over 100 people join every Tuesday and Friday.
that's fantastic. So is it a guided meditation or is it just silence?
It's silence. So basically I mute myself, I mute all the other participants, and they just meditate, or they can join the live stream that goes onto the YouTube as well.
Now, with the group meditation, do you find there's a different dynamic or different kind of frequency that goes along with that?
Yeah. So basically, the energies that come in, it's sort of like a collective consciousness. It's a large group of people, awakening people and awakened people, all coming together, meditating, and it's sort of like the energies are kind of pulling everybody up to the highest potential that they can. Sort of like the opposite of the mob mentality. When you get a group of like, you know, football hooligans, and you get one of them, will actually bring the whole group down to that really low kind of vibration. This is the flip side. This is sort of everybody's meditating, rising their consciousness, and it's a direct experience. Like people come and they go, "That's real. I can feel it. My consciousness is different after sitting in that for an hour."
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much for making that
Thank
available.
you. Yeah, sure. I love it. Absolutely love it.
And if you had one message that you wanted the audience to take away from our conversation today, what would it be?
Um, so I guess I understand that a lot of your audience are NDE enthusiasts. Well, what I would say is that we don't need to have an NDE to have an experience of something greater. Um, yeah, I mean, so they can definitely journey within and have all of this world open up to them, OBEs, lucid dreams, all of that. It just as long as they're interested in it, as long as they put one foot forward and say, okay, I want to make a commitment. I want to evolve. I want to become love. The universe will take 10 steps towards you to fulfill that.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Gareth, for being my guest. You are a wealth of interesting experiences and so many beautiful messages that you have to share with the world. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much, Tia. It's a pleasure being here with you today.
Thank you for being here. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here and supporting my channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing if you enjoy near-death experiences and other spiritually transformative stories. It helps the algorithm know that this information is useful and push it out to more people. And that's the goal, to get as many people to know that we are eternal spiritual beings and that we never die. Our bodies might die, but our essence will never die. And I want people to live with less fear. Let's all spread the word, like, comment, Subscribe, share, hit that little notification bell so you get all the notifications when my videos post. Thank you for all of your support. I'm sending love to you.